Welcome back to the channel. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go over a little bit of news to tell us why this global market drop seems to be occurring. Then we're gonna take a look at some Bitcoin on-chain metrics to see what's happening on-chain for Bitcoin and what that may be able to tell us about the broader crypto market. Because one thing I've taught you is that Bitcoin is the reserve in the crypto space. A lot of people invest only in altcoins and not in Bitcoin, and I'm sure some of you do that too. But you have to keep in mind, you've got to follow Bitcoin because Bitcoin is where the larger, broader market cap is. That's where the reserve is. If people are getting scared of other assets, most of them in this space are going to flee to Bitcoin, not to the dollar. So you're going to have some that are going to flee to Bitcoin and put a percentage in stable coins. And that way they keep 1% of their portfolio balanced. They keep another percentage in Bitcoin where it can go up or down and give them a little bit of a hedge, right? Because even though their stable coins will stay flat, the Bitcoin could keep going up. So that's kind of what people do. And if people do that, you need to know what's happening no matter what, it just is important. So we're going to start off looking at those on-chain metrics. Then we're going to look at the Bitcoin chart. Then we're going to look at the EGLD chart. And we're going to get some good information out of this. So make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and have some coffee if you have coffee. That's good. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and get started, you guys. All right. Like, subscribe. Make sure you do that. You're going to forget later, so take care of it now. All right, let's see here. We're going to first switch over to the full screen view, all right? So what we're looking at right now are the Bitcoin on-chain metrics. So the first thing to do is figure out what happened, right? Between last night and now, what is occurring that's caused this drop? So the first thing that we see in these on-chain analytics is that we're looking at net flow, all right? So two things that are very simple to follow here. One, in blue, you're seeing the net flow. This is the net flow of Bitcoin. The zero level is basically even. Anything below zero is an outflow. That's Bitcoin leaving exchanges. Anything above the zero is an inflow. That's Bitcoin coming onto exchanges, all right? So those are the net flows, either positive or negative. Now, what we are going to do is compare this to the price. The price is in orange. So you can see on the left-hand side are the price numbers, on the right-hand side are the numbers for the actual net flow information. So pretty much the first thing that we see here is this massive drop in the blue line. This is our net flow data. So this shows us that a whole bunch of Bitcoin left exchanges. Well, when did that happen? That happened November the 25th at around 1300. So that happened yesterday afternoon. We saw about 6,000 Bitcoin, a little over than that actually, 6,200 Bitcoin exit exchanges. Now that's an incredible amount of money. I mean, you're talking about 6,200 Bitcoin. Let's do a little math. Multiply that by the price, which right now is around 54,400. That tells us that last night about $337.2 million left exchanges. Well, what happened after that? Okay, we saw an inflow after that of around, right around the zero level, about 100 Bitcoin. We spiked up late last night, like right before midnight, around 2,300 to around 1,200 Bitcoin. Well, immediately after this inflow, we started seeing the price start to drop. So that tells me that these inflows started happening around the time some news hit the wire. And basically what this is doing is pulling liquidity out of Bitcoin. That's what I'm seeing here. I'm seeing that people inflowed their BTC onto exchanges, they took profits, and then basically we saw the same pattern happening, right? You see a big inflow. Let's actually make this bigger so it becomes clearer. And remember, the zero level is here, okay, where my mouse is, so that dashed line. So we see that a number of big inflows followed by a number of big outflows. So we had a big inflow here, price kept dropping. We had another big inflow, price dropped even more. Another big inflow, price dropped even more. But then after that, we had an outflow of around 1,700. So that tells me that you had news come out, and we'll go over what news that was. That news led to people pulling liquidity out of Bitcoin, okay? As that happened, you also had people accumulating. You saw big outflows. Now what we're doing is we're looking just at in the current hour, we're looking at huge amounts of outflows. We're looking at another 1,000 Bitcoin leaving exchanges. So the question you got to ask yourself, whether you're looking at this for Bitcoin or for other crypto assets, is why is this happening in Bitcoin? What's going on? That's going to give us an answer. And we're going to come back to why this is going on. I wanted to start you off with this, though. The next thing I want to show you are the exchange reserves. Now, this shows another interesting thing, right? That correlates exactly with what we're looking at. Now, to explain this to you, pretty simple. We're looking at the reserve on exchanges in blue. We're looking at the Bitcoin price in orange. So what you see here is that before any of this started happening, this was yesterday at around 1200, we saw there was a huge drop in the Bitcoin exchange reserves. That's around the time the price actually started dropping, and that's when we saw those outflows start to begin, right? That's what we were looking at in the prior chart. Now you're seeing a large number, or I'm sorry, those inflows begin. So as we started seeing those inflows begin, we saw the exchange reserve go back up. And at the same time, the price was dropping. Well, this correlates exactly with what we're seeing, so this is a good thing to see. Another interesting thing here is liquidations. You see in orange are long liquidations, and in red are short liquidations. So we did see massive long liquidations when we had this drop of the Bitcoin price from around, from up here about 54. Actually, this all happened at the 54 level, surprisingly enough. This happened on a very small time frame. This happened within a 10-minute period, these long liquidations. So when the price dropped from 54.5 down to 54.2, just in that area, you had massive long liquidation. So a lot of people went high leverage long at that price and they got burned. So we saw a lot of liquidations there. If we switch this to a 1 hour res instead of a minute res, well, then you can see really the massive scale of this. Okay, so we're going to look at the price there, and these are our liquidations. Let's make these a bit smaller so we can see them a bit better. Okay, so what we're seeing here is that as the price dropped, longs got really burned. A lot of long liquidation. So we flushed a good amount of leverage out of the market. Not even a ton, honestly, but we flushed a good amount of leverage out of the market. That's a good thing to see. Okay, so now let's go back to the net flow. All right, we're not going to save this. We'll go back here. So we'll go back to the net flow, and now you understand what we saw, right? We saw long liquidations when the price moved. We saw that exchange reserves dipped and then started to go back up. And in the net flow, we can see why. That's the first thing we looked at. Big drop, huge outflow, and then we started having inflows that pushed the price down, and now we're having outflows. Okay, now we look at the news. This is the news that came out. So it says new COVID variant sparks global travel restrictions. So basically there's a number of travel restrictions that are being put on due to a new variant. European Union and other destinations have blocked flights from African countries following the discovery of an aggressive mutation of the virus we don't want to really talk about, because if you do, you could get banned on YouTube for some reason. So we're not really going to say the name more than once. But pretty much that's what's going on. There's news of a new variant and flights are being blocked, and that's a reason for people to get scared. Well, is that really a reason for people to get scared at this point with the, with the state of everything? I mean, at this point, you have a large number of people developing immunity. So there's not really as massive of a reason to have fear as there was before, unless this variant turns out to be like some, ridiculous strain. And, we got to read here that right now, only dozens of cases have been identified. News of the variant is already sparking fears around the world and rattling global markets. I think it's a red herring. I think this is what people want you to think. This is not something to be insanely fearful about, but let's look at Bitcoin and try to see what people are doing. Okay, so what are people doing? This news comes out and you see a bunch of BTC start coming onto exchanges last night. Well, if I was a very wealthy person and I had a lot of investments in stocks and bonds and all that kind of stuff, and I've been using Bitcoin as a safe haven, right? Let's say you're a multi-millionaire or even a billionaire. Well, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use that Bitcoin that's been appreciating to buy stocks and other assets when there are large drops. Now, this kind of news coming out late last night, me as, assuming I was like a multi-millionaire or multi-billionaire investor, what I'd be looking at is where can I pull liquidity from? Because I'm going to have great opportunities to buy stocks tomorrow and diversify my portfolio. Not all these guys are in Bitcoin long term. They put money in here and they're holding it in here as a hedge. And then what they might do is when they see good opportunities elsewhere, they may diversify. And then when those things seem like they're about to go down, they'll go back in Bitcoin. They keep moving their money back and forth to make the most returns. So In this case, what it looks like to me is that this news came out, and then last night, people started realizing that this morning, the stocks are going to drop, and they're more than likely going to have opportunities to make buys at value purchases. And we see here a flea coming out of Bitcoin liquidity likely is buying the dip elsewhere. It's probably going to be buying various stocks, various funds at a discount, while the rest of the market flees and just gets burned. The rich will get richer. That's kind of what I'm seeing here. There's no other reason for there to be this kind of fear. Well, the only other reason is if people at this time assumed that there would be a mass fear event, that they could be selling to buy back lower, right? You see all these outflows beginning. Well, this means that as the price dropped from about 59K down to 54K, now Bitcoin is leaving exchanges more. So that means that more people are buying down here at this 54K price. So that's the first thing we're seeing with Bitcoin. Let's switch over to the chart now and see what that tells us. Okay, so we're going to go back to the main view. We'll switch over to the chart. So this is the Bitcoin chart. All right, you see this yellow line? I gave you this yellow line a while ago. All right, this was maybe in my last TA video, I showed you that yellow line. Let's zoom out to the daily so you can really see what that yellow line indicates. So I told you that this yellow line is likely going to be a bottom for Bitcoin. What we're likely going to see is something like we saw in these two prior drops, right? We saw Bitcoin come down and touch this yellow trend line. Then we saw it come down and touch this yellow trend line again. And that's actually what created the trend line, right? Those two touches. Well, when we go back here, there's a reason I gave you this as a target. Right? It's because this kind of drop would go exactly to that trend line, and that's literally what we saw. So I told you that I had my orders sitting at around 54K to 55K for a reason. I put them here because I looked at around 53.6 as a bottom. So I actually had an order sitting right here at 53.6, and it happened to hit. And that's a good reason to have it because I see a long-term trend line, and it could be a value buy. So I value bought my Bitcoin right at the bottom of this dip, and I'm really happy about that. And we'll see if it dips further, I'll buy more. But right now, that's what I'm looking at as a bottom. That's why you also have this massive arrow here. I put this in my previous one too. Now, this arrow is telling us that if we drop down to this level, what you can expect is that we start to recover, and as we do, the next leg up takes us all the way up to around 95,000, similar to these legs up coming and taking us to new highs. This leg up would come and take us to a new high. So this is still what I'm expecting. I'm expecting the price to come up to 95 to 100K, and this might be that last opportunity to buy, just like 40K was the last opportunity to buy before we came up and touched all-time highs, or just like 30K was the last opportunity to buy before we started recovering. This is literally the same thing. We are not seeing anything different so far, and in fact, we can move all the way down to 49.7, where the 200 exponential moving average is on the daily, and still be perfectly fine. So in reality, this is nothing to fear. This is more of just a visualization of how the market is reacting to what's happening globally. And I think what's happening here is that impact on Bitcoin is correlating down to everything else. So we're going to move over to EGLD in just a minute, but there's another thing I want to show you on Bitcoin first. So the next thing I want to show you on Bitcoin, the only cause for some minor concern is that we're dropping the RSI below this 45 level. Now, the 45 level is a very strong level, and usually two things will happen. When you drop below that 45 level, it's either because you're in a massive correction, like you were here when we dropped from the 60Ks all the way down to 30Ks. You see we dropped all the way down to the bottom of this area. Then we started working our way up, and this kind of correlated with this entire correction. So a drop like this could always be the start of that. It could be the start of something further that takes you down and does another massive correction. So that's a possibility that we can't ignore right now, but we can say it's unlikely with the state of the global markets. The next thing is this 45 level. If you're just dipping below the 45 level and you recover, well, then you're in this kind of uptrend, right? This is what we saw before. We saw us get overextended up here on the RSI. We saw price keep moving, but it had dips in between, keeping the RSI leveled. Then we had another drop down to around 40K. RSI goes below the 45 level. Then you have a massive pump. You get overextended again. Now you have another drop, RSI goes down to the 45 level. Well, the interesting thing is, and I just put this out on Twitter a little while ago, let's actually get rid of this box, we don't need this. The interesting thing is that if we do some horizontal lines here, you can really see, or I'm sorry, vertical lines, you can really see what's up. So if we click here at our bottom, when we hit the bottom here at this dip, and then we click here at this candle where we hit the bottom, take a look at what's happening. Well, what really is happening is that this bottom and this bottom are roughly at the same levels at RSI. Now, RSI is the relative strength index. That's telling you the relative strength of an asset. And what we are really seeing is that the relative strength of Bitcoin right now at around 54K is equaling the relative strength when it first dropped down to 40K. And what happened after that? Well, not first dropped down, when it last dropped down to 40K. What happened after that is that we ended up doing a little bit of a correction in this area, and then we had a massive reversal and we hit all-time highs. I think that's exactly what we're going to see again. I think we're going to see more sideways trading here and possibly even dipping down to around 49K, because when you're in this type of fear, that can cascade and you might see more people just get scared because of this news as they wake up in the next few hours, right? Not everyone in the US is awake right now. You have a lot of people on the West Coast where it's probably around 7:30 a.m. for them. So you'll have a lot more people waking up over the next few hours. And I think that you could see a little bit more of a dip, or you might see them buying the opportunity. So keep it in mind, these kind of things happen, and you have to analyze global markets to figure out why they could be happening. Put yourself in the shoes of a billionaire, right? A lot of billionaires are not just putting all their eggs in one basket, they're diversifying. And when they can take gains from one place and put them elsewhere, they're in a good position. And if you have some multimillionaires or billionaires who bought Bitcoin down at this 40K dip and now see an opportunity to sell at 54, take some profits and reinvest them in other markets, it's entirely feasible that those profits are leaving Bitcoin and going back into the stock market. So keep that in mind. Very, very possible that that's what's happening. Okay, that is it for Bitcoin. In general, I see at 49.6 being the bottom, absolute bottom, but I really think it's possible that we just recover right from where we are now. So the next few hours are really going to be telling. We're going to be looking at the 4-hour chart, and we're really going to be seeing, does this bounce off the trend line hold? Like right now, what you can see is that we did hit that trend line and we put in a green candle. We started reversing. So we need to see, is this a short-term green candle or are we going to fall further? And if we are going to fall further, well, then we're going to look at our regression line right here around 45, along with our 200 exponential moving average on the daily, which was around 49. So those are going to be our targets for a maximum pain bottom. And basically at that point, that's when you would see a quick reversal. Now, this is pretty much all you need to look at as far as downside targets, and just choose your entry points if you're planning to accumulate Bitcoin. As far as upward targets, we have to first recover out of here, but the key is to see Bitcoin break above around 61K. Once it breaks above 61K, well, basically at that point, what that means is that it's gone above our regression channel, because this regression channel, we can expect it to be resistance. So we break above that resistance and we start moving back up. That's going to be really, really good. All right, that's about 20 minutes on Bitcoin and some news and explaining global markets a little bit. Let's move on. We're going to take a look at EGLD now. So taking a look at EGLD, what we see here is that EGLD had another nice little dip. Now let's take a look at this on a longer time frame and compare it to some of the things that we were looking at. Well, one of the main things, hang on, let's go over here. We're going to pull up EGLD on the daily. Okay, so we pull up EGLD on the daily chart. And what do we see? Well, first thing we see is that we came down and we touched right here. All right, let's see where we touched. We are going to make a horizontal line. We're going to see here that we touched right about 389. If you were watching my videos last week, I told you that Bitcoin touching these highs means that we could have a possible bottom at around 390. We touched 389. Now, this was a number that I gave you just based on volume data and based on where I saw us potentially recovering. Now, the thing is, I was hoping that if we came down and touched 390, it would be a little later. I wanted to see the 20 exponential moving average on the daily move up a bit more. Our 20 exponential moving average on the daily is at about 375. So 375 is still completely feasible for EGLD. Why is that? Well, let's look at this 20 exponential moving average on a longer term. When you start looking at this, and let me lock in my fib. Okay, when you start looking at this 20 exponential moving average, which is the blue line there, Okay, basically what you're seeing is that throughout these uptrends with eGold, we always come back and we touch the 20 exponential moving average. Sometimes we actually even drop below it and we touch the orange one, which is the 50 exponential moving average. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means that with eGold, we are entirely possible in coming all the way down to around 318. But 318, if we were to come down and touch that area, you'd be looking for a huge wick, something similar to this, right? You'd be looking for massive buying in that range, because in that range, you are getting an immense value buy based on how far we moved up. I don't think we're going that low. I think the lowest that we go potentially is 375, because that's where our 20 exponential is. Maybe if we wick down, we come touch this Fibonacci level at 350, and then we start moving up very rapidly. If that kind of thing happens, you're probably not going to have time to buy. That's going to be the kind of eventuality that I already have my buy orders in for. I have them there just in case, right? Because I know where I see eGold going over the next year as the DEX starts to list other things, as ESDT and BEP20 tokens can be converted to, ERC20 and BEP20 tokens can be converted to ESDT, and Elrond rolls out incentives for doing so. As things like that happen, I think we're just going to continue seeing the value of eGold go up. It's a limited supply asset. So basically what's going to happen is that the supply shock is going to start hitting people when they want to get in. They're going to be forced to bid the price up to get their hands on this asset. So short term, this is nothing but an opportunity, right? We got overextended pretty massively. And to be honest with you, it wasn't that massively, but we got overextended. We hit around 540. And when we dipped down, we got support on this Fibonacci level at 425. If we lost that, we were looking at around 390. We hit that today. So the key really is to hold 390 right now. If we don't hold 390, then you could see eGold dip down to around 370 or potentially 350. Complete bottom. I don't see it going below 350. If it goes down there, I expect it to also recover very quickly. So I'm not waiting. I already have my orders set between 350 and 375 just in case. I even have a couple above 375 just in case. And it's just splitting up my my dollar cost average orders. It's just a way to get in value because I see it going a lot higher in the future. And that's kind of what I'm looking at, and that's what I think a lot of you guys should be looking at. You should be looking at the overall trend. When these dips happen, the thing to remind yourself is that eGold is on a dip, okay? And it's at $400. It was 2-3 weeks ago that we were talking about 300 being a bottom. And right now, it's looking like 400 is a bottom. So if 400 is a bottom, well, then what's the top? I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what's happening. The fact that Bitcoin going up or down can cause this kind of a ripple in the market is very, very fascinating because there's so many projects now that you would think would move independent to Bitcoin, but they're not yet. I don't think it's going to happen for quite a while. As long as Bitcoin keeps growing and leading the market cap, I think you're going to continue seeing similar things. Like right now, Bitcoin's 54K. Well, when Bitcoin is, 100,000, eGold could be 3x from where it is now because the remainder of the market cap in the crypto world can distribute very, very rapidly based on progress being made on blockchains. And you're about to have Holoride go live very, very soon. I think that's going to bring in a lot more investment. Holoride, keep in mind, is a metaverse project. Let me show you another metaverse project. This is called Mana. You see what's happened to Mana? Mana just on October 28th was 74 cents. Right now, it's trading for $4.67. One of my friends told me about Mana wasn't even on my radar. A friend of mine told me about it at like $1.90 or something, and I bought some. Just, hey, my friend talks about it, tells me it's going to be good. I'm like, all right, I trust you. I'm going to buy some. So I bought some. And it's doing great. But that's because metaverse projects are hot right now. And what do you have? You have Holoride coming to the Elrond ecosystem. The lottery literally just finished. So people are claiming their Holoride tokens. And it's going to be on the DEX very soon. When it goes out on the DEX, I think you're going to have a lot more people wanting to buy it. Especially because you're talking about Audi and Porsche and, technology to enable virtual augmented reality experiences within a vehicle for passengers. It's going to be pretty nuts what this can do to the future. And having a project like this come out on Elrond is even more interesting because now you're going to have people coming to the Elrond DEX, to the Maiar exchange, simply for the other projects. And what are they going to have to do to get into those projects? Well, they're going to have to buy EGLD, and then they're going to have to buy MEX, and then they're likely going to trade the MEX for that project and possibly use the MEX to stake. There's going to be a lot of inflow of people coming into this ecosystem. And I think that this ecosystem, even at $400, is insanely undervalued. I was telling you that at $100, at $50, at $190. That's because this thing should be a top 10 coin. That's where it should be. But none of this value has been priced in, which is making it an incredible opportunity, in my opinion. Keep in mind, not financial advice, because I could be completely wrong. The one difference between Bitcoin and every other asset, doesn't matter which one it is that Bitcoin does not need a person to survive. Ask yourself what happens to Ethereum if something happens to Vitalik. If something were to happen to Vitalik, the price of Ethereum would crash because it's so dependent on him as a leader, right? The same thing with Elrond and other projects. There's a team of people that you're dependent on. With Bitcoin, you're not, right? With Bitcoin, all you're dependent on is that the fiat currencies of the world are going to keep getting devalued. And obviously they are. It's happened throughout history. There has not been one fiat currency in the history of the world that has ever survived, right? All of them have had the same thing happen. They have had their backers start printing them until they collapse. We're seeing history repeat itself. So Bitcoin is a hedge against everything. Now, I'm not saying that other projects are bad because you have to worry about specific teams or people. I'm just saying it makes them higher risk, because the risk is that if they don't deliver, the project won't deliver. But with Bitcoin, you don't need anyone to deliver. All you need are miners to be online, right? And miners are making a ton of money, so they're gonna keep being online. It's a lot less risk. It's why it's the reserve. That is pretty much it, you guys. You know my short-term targets. You know my long-term targets. In my opinion, I think that you're going to see a huge rise in both EGLD and MEX within the next 2 to 3 weeks maximum. As Holoride becomes available, I think it's going to bring a lot more people into the ecosystem. I think there's going to be a lot of news on Holoride and how it performs. And I think it's going to attract people. I think as those people come in, they're going to want to buy EGLD. And I think EGLD's a limited supply asset, and it's going to start moving up very rapidly. And this discount should not be ignored. I would also just set buys from 350 to around 390. In that range, set a few buy orders if you're not planning on buying right away and you're waiting for a dip. Don't wait for the dip and then wait to buy on spot. That doesn't usually work out. You can, not financial advice, I'm just telling you how I'm doing it. I stay prepared so I can go out, do my thing, enjoy my day, and if the price dips, I get my EGLD. All right, you guys, that's about it. There's not a ton more to look at on the EGLD chart because we are just cruising right now. We are in the middle of a consolidation that was much heavily needed. RSI on the daily has come back down to the 60 level. It's looking extremely beautiful. The last time, I mean, kind of like Bitcoin, the last time that RSI was this low, I mean, let's take a look at this, right? This is where we are now. This is where we are now. This is where we are on the last dip at around $300. Okay, that's where we were. So the RSI now is almost back down to where it last was at 300, and the price is 400. So what that's telling me is that the same strength we had at $300, we now are showing at 400, meaning that anywhere around $400 could be considered a bottom. We still prepare for anything lower because we know it could happen, but we also want to understand the strength of the asset that we're working with, and the strength is getting stronger. Okay, that's everything for now. Hope you guys enjoy this. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you leave me some feedback. We're going to come back to Elrond probably in the next day or two because I think a lot's going to change very quickly with Elrond as things keep moving with the DEX. And then we'll probably have a cooling off period while we wait for more new projects to come. But this Holoride situation is going to make things interesting, and I think right now is the time to earn your MEX and earn your rewards because there's no telling what those will be worth a year from now. That's why I have no issues earning locked MEX. All right, that to me is a long-term investment because I think MEX is going to be much more valuable in a year or 2 years or 3 years. So even in a year from now when it starts unlocking, I'm probably not going to do anything other than keep farming. So that's my plan. Anyways, that's all. No more rambling. Hope this gave you good info. Leave your feedback in the comments. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Make sure you like. Make sure you subscribe. Have a happy Thanksgiving. That already passed. But have a great Black Friday. You got a lot of sales going on. Enjoy yourself. Peace out.